Andrei is a brand, content, and growth strategist, and he's got 14 years experience across agencies, SaaS, and fintechs. In his previous roles, he's increased share of search by 23% year over year, while contributing to 60% AIR growth. He's grown brand reach 6x, built a 120,000 subscriber newsletter from scratch, and led customer intelligence efforts that doubled demo conversions, all of which I would definitely want to learn more about. And we all know the vast majority of B2B buyers choose from brands that they thought of on day one. If you're not top of mind when buyers start their journey, it's pretty much likely that you've already lost the deal. And they blend into that sea of sameness with generic messaging and predictable tactics. But honestly, it really doesn't have to be this way. And this is what Andrei is here to speak to us about. He's here to reveal how to shift from branding for aesthetics to branding as strategic behavior and the recall triggers that make buyers think of you first when they think of your category. Now, before I hand over to Andrei, with just a quick housekeeping, we're going to be having our Q&A session at the end. So please do keep your questions coming in throughout. Please feel free to pop those in the chat box or in the Q&A box. And I'll be joining at the end to go through all of your questions.
Well, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be with you all today. And as I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about, I went through the several stages of presentation building. Stage one being, oh, I'm really excited to do this. Stage two being, why did I sign up for this? I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. Stage three being, why did I sign up for this? I have too many things I want to talk about. Stage four being, oh my gosh, the slides are due tomorrow. I should start working on the slides. And stage five, we're here today. So I want to go in a very different direction today. And I want to speak with you all very informally and casually. You know, Martha was very kind to share a little bit about my background, my professional background. I wanted to tell you all, not a lot of that really matters to me. At the end of the day, I care about people, about serving people and showing up with integrity. So a lot of my career development has actually been very curiosity driven. Really curious about human behavior, why people make the decisions that they make, and how to help align company values with real customer problems and pain points. And most of the talk around brand this day, there's so much on LinkedIn about why brand is important and why everybody should invest in brand and how do you talk to your CFO about brand and how do you measure brand. I'm not going to talk about any of that. I think other presenters have already covered those topics. They're probably a lot smarter than me in those domains. So I want to go in a different direction, and I want to walk you through the frameworks and systems and principles that I've used over the past almost 15 years as I've navigated through my career as a marketer. So there's three words here: rules, cheats, and rebels. And they're very intentional to what I'm going to go through today. Rules are important. They help us stay consistent, but they can also make us invisible. Cheats are shortcuts. They create surprise. Sometimes they're done with good intention, sometimes not, and we'll talk about that. And rebels. Rebels are the things that make us question why we're doing something in the first place. And there's frameworks where you can apply a rebel lens to how you think about brand. So today we're going to break this down into three acts. The rules we've misunderstood, the cheats we could use to create impact, and the rebel lens we need to really foster creativity. I want to first go back to 2008. A flight attendant named David Holmes, who had done many sort of like safety, pre-flight safety talks, noticed that nobody in the flight was actually paying attention to what he was saying. And very spontaneously, he decided to actually take the safety demo script and turn it into a rap. Well, people started paying attention. Somebody recorded it and it uploaded onto YouTube. It went viral and it became one of the most memorable brand moments for Southwest Airlines. But here's the wild thing. This wasn't a campaign. This wasn't like a marketing stunt or a gimmick. It was a moment of brand behavior, something that aligned perfectly with Southwest's identity, which was fun, human, and a little bit rebellious. And as this kind of picked up steam and people started sharing this video, the company didn't shut it down. They actually leaned into it. They even made a commercial with this guy. And it became something that people talked about, a talk trigger actually. And that's a principle we're going to talk about today. And the business impact of this was also tremendous. Huge earned media, zero ad spend, and a massive boost to the brand's affinity. It showed us that when you design things for behavior, you don't always have to outspend your competition. And I think that's going to be sort of like the heart and essence of what I want to cover today. How do we design unforgettable brand moments? Not just the big campaigns, those play a role, but also the small operational moments that earn memory, meaning, and momentum. So let's start with some misunderstandings, specifically in B2B SaaS and tech around brand. Brand is not an awareness play. It's not one campaign. It's not the logo or the visual identity. It's not the brand strategy guidelines. And it's not even the story that the company tells. We have to shift our thinking from creating moments of hype to creating systems of meaning. And what I mean by that, when you think about it through the lens of campaign thinking, it's attention driven. It's time-bound hype. It's something to be big and flashy and get people to pay attention. Again, those serve a purpose and they're important as we grow our businesses, but there's still moments of hype. Instead, when we think about brand, or at least I think about brand, I think about systems of meaning. I think about behaviors. I think about these ongoing and consistent rituals that reinforce a promise a company makes in the way they choose to express it in the mind of the customer. So it's a reframe about how to think about brand. And I want to challenge us to kind of get to some of these principles today through this talk. Number one, brand is about mental availability. How do we make it easy for people to remember us in such a noisy world? Number two is mental associations. What are we doing to create distinct rational, emotional, and sensory memory codes? Things that can become triggers that automatically tie that thought to a brand identity. They're lived experiences. Something that a mentor of mine told me many, many years ago, long before I even got into marketing, is people will remember how you make them feel more than what you say to them. The lived experiences of our customer are a place where we can really reinforce what our brand means. And lastly, it's resonance. And it's understanding what people's motivations are. And typically, most commonly with behavioral psychology, we know that the two most important motivators for most all of us here are status and affiliation. We look around the room, we want to be associated with a certain type of person or group of people or a certain ideal. The status is, how do I present myself? How am I showing up in my environment, whether it's personal or professional? These are all very strong motivators for human behavior. And powerful brands know how to tap into that in an ethical way to really create stronger alignment and recall with their customers. So there's three brands here. I don't have their names. I'm intentionally not putting their names. I think maybe one or two, well, one of them actually you can see the name. The other two you can't. If anybody wants to volunteer, anybody want to call out who these brands are or take a guess? I can't see anyone, so I guess I will just go ahead and start saying who these are. Let's talk about the first one, Oatly. Oatly takes on a very strong anti-marketing approach to how they've built their brand. They really took something that is typical, right? Like the milk industry, we all know it. And they have a very bold stance with their oat milk product. And over the years, they've experimented a lot with growing their identity by essentially taking off the mask and veil of marketing jargon and big advertising and doing it in a very different way where they show humanness and transparency. They want to tell you exactly where the bullshit is, and they're playing on it. The second is Casper, the mattress brand. Casper cares deeply about the lived experience of its customers. And when you think about the quality of our sleep, where we go to bed every night, it's important that we get the rest that we need. And by really swapping its logo on its boxes to actually evoke the sleep first mission of Casper, it's making a statement in the market about what it cares about. And then the third one is a brand called Chewy, which is a pet care e-commerce brand. And when a customer has one of their pets die, Chewy actually sends handwritten notes and flowers to each of their customers to express their sympathy. These are really powerful moments of brand impact. Again, they're not just all about flashy campaigns. They're about tapping into how are we making people feel and how do we make it really clear what we stand for in a noisy category. Now, one of the other areas where there's a brand delusion is what happens at the point of sale and afterwards, where we know through research that many customers actually uncover new things that attract them to the brand and dive into actually creating stronger affinity post-purchase. But most of us, when we think about brand, we're thinking about the untapped customers, the future buyers. And that's absolutely important. You know, the 95-5 rule that everybody talks about, that's incredibly important. But when you actually have a customer, that's where you really have to show up. That's where reality sets in and your product has to deliver on a promise. Your service has to deliver on a promise. And all of that can be wrapped into an experience. And I've gone through this exercise a couple of times at different companies I've worked with, where we looked at the entire customer journey and mapped it out from basically first touch all the way to transaction and post sales. And we documented all of the moments that a customer would be interacting with the brand. So from initial consideration to engagement, evaluation, moment of purchase, and adoption and usage. This was actually something really big that we did at PandaDoc, for example, where we built a team to do essentially a customer journey secret shopper exercise. And we went through our customers' buying process. We documented everything, every single email that we received. How timely were those emails? How many emails were we getting? How many handoffs were we getting? Where were the greatest points of friction? And then we partnered with both product and CS to map where we saw huge gaps in experience. So when you think about every single moment, either building or eroding your brand, it shifts the lens a little bit. Again, it's not about a campaign. It's about creating rituals and systems of meaning for your customer. And I would challenge all of us to kind of go through this exercise to the best of our ability. Literally walking in the shoes of your customer can be a very eye-opening experience to help you see, is my messaging and what I'm putting out in the market aligned with the experience that a customer actually gets when they interact with my product and my company? And that also includes the people, right? So just be super transparent. When we did this exercise, we saw that between SDR and account executive and customer onboarding and customer success and account management, our customers were being essentially handed off to a new person every couple of weeks. It was a terrible experience. We also saw that the type of communication that they were receiving from various functions of the business were completely irrelevant. And it was actually getting in the way of them being able to adopt the product or know who to go to if they had a question and needed support. So again, put on the lens that your customer has, walk in their shoes and see if every interaction your business is creating with customers is either eroding your brand or building your brand. And a framework that I've used, and I've never really talked about this publicly, it's not my framework, but it's a framework that I have used, is the Talk Triggers framework, which was developed by Jay Baer and Daniel Lemon. And this is a really interesting way to think about operational moments where brands can really shine. And I'll walk through some examples. But we have to remember these 4 things about what exactly a talk trigger is, because if we're trying to create a brand behavior, it has to be something that is universal to the brand and can scale with the brand. So number 1, it has to be remarkable. It has to be something that is distinct and surprising, something people will notice. Number 2 is it has to be repeatable. All customers should have access to experience it, not just a select few. Number 3, it has to be relevant. It has to somehow tie to your brand narrative or your product offer. And number 4, it has to be reasonable. It can't be something that is unbelievable, or inconsistent. So something that people can actually tangibly experience and understand. These are the 4 principles of talk triggers. This is what I've used when I've developed, certain types of processes, like sending custom shoe boxes to luxury retailers, or the time I created a $2 bill experience that I direct mailed to every single one of our customers. I tapped into these principles here to get people talking about us word of mouth. So when we know the principles of talk triggers, which are the 4 that I just showed you, then we can define what are the types of talk triggers that we can create for our own brand experience. And there's 5 here that we're going through. You only really need 1, and you got to do it effectively. But essentially, if you can tie it to your brand and deliver it in a moment that matters, it can create real word of mouth impact with your customers. So the first one is generosity. Basically, give them more than what they expected. Superhuman, a company Superhuman, does these free 30-minute coaching calls for inbox zero, where they actually walk their customers through how to optimize their email inbox and create a system that's going to be sustainable. This is obviously attached to their product, but it is something different in the sense that it's about actually setting their customers up for success for a very long period of time. They don't even have to use the product to walk away from that coaching call with the success principles. The second is talkable speed, doing something unusually fast. And Zapier would be a great example of this, how they respond to support requests in minutes, even on weekends. The third is talkable usefulness, help beyond the product itself. Notion comes to mind here. They offer a massive free template library. I would even say Wynter does this very well with their website teardowns that they post on LinkedIn when Pep walks through a company's homepage and essentially gives them free advice on how to up-level their messaging, positioning, and clarity. The fourth is empathy, showing unexpected human care. This is one that I've liked to anchor on personally. And really, this is, again, about acts of kindness that go beyond what most people would expect. So Pilot is an accounting software, for example. And in 2023, when SVP collapsed, they scrambled to proactively help their customers reconcile bank accounts, move over funds, and access capital quickly. They didn't need to do that. That was a talk trigger focused on empathy. And then lastly is attitude, talkable attitude. So infusing your brand with personality and flair. And MailChimp is a great example of this. They've had a quirky mascot and voice and identity, and it's a completely differentiated sort of experience in the email category. So these are 5 talk triggers. You don't need to know to do all 5. In fact, I would not suggest you try to do all 5, but picking one and really anchoring a set of tests to figure out how effective it is. So how do you test these types of talk triggers? Well, first thing you want to do is you want to audit your customer journey. You want to look at all the relevant touch points. If you can't do a secret shopper experience, that's typically the best. You can rely on data, but also rely on your CS team. They can share a lot about what the customer's experiences are post-sales and where there are points of friction. Identify what those key points of friction or emotion are, and then ask yourself, what would surprise or delight a customer in this situation? And when you ask yourself that, filter it through the 4 R's that we talked about earlier. And then start with this really small, controlled segment after that. So it could be new customers in one segment, maybe customers coming in through a very specific channel, maybe your top 50 customers, or maybe even customers who are at risk, right? Like they might end up, deactivating their account soon. It's really up to you to kind of figure out what segment you want to test it with, but definitely start small. This is not meant to be a big budget, lengthy project. This is something that typically could be done in 30 to 60 days. And then you have to measure both the qualitative and quantitative impact of that. A little caveat around measurement, especially when we talk about what people feel and experience, that's a really hard thing to measure. So we're going to have to go with the data and metrics that we have access to, but instincts matter here a lot. And you could typically hear a lot of customers, if they talk about a positive experience, that's a really positive indicator that probably won't show up on the dashboard. Social posts is another one. Any number of unsolicited emails or direct messages that you get about that talk trigger, that could be another really interesting kind of leading indicator. Or if a customer brings it up on a call with a CSM unprompted. But either way, you want to really map what it is that define and map what it is that you're trying to create in terms of a moment of surprise and delight, and look at the qualitative and quantitative impact of that experiment. And at the end of it, are more people talking about it? Are customers noticing it? Are different customers noticing it? Is this something that is sustainable? And if we reinforce this, does this really help our brand become more memorable? Those are the questions that we want to ask ourselves after going through that experience. So again, this is something that I've done a number of times, and it doesn't have to be hard. Start super simple with something like this. I want to give you another example of a talk trigger, probably one of my favorites as a case study. I don't know, depending on where you're located, I don't know how many people here are based out of the United States or international, but in the United States, we have a restaurant called Cheesecake Factory. It's fairly commercial. They have locations all over the country, but they've done something pretty unusual. They have an unreasonably large menu. It has 250 items on it. And it's not a new thing. This was actually the format that they used when they launched their restaurant in Beverly Hills in 1978. So here, the menu becomes actually a point of focus for the brand and for the customers. It's not a gimmick. Everybody who goes into a Cheesecake Factory is going to flip through all those pages and look at all of those options. 1 in 5 customers, when they were surveyed, mentioned this menu. It's so excessive and it's so distinct that people feel compelled to talk about it. And the other interesting thing about the Cheesecake Factory is they don't spend a lot of money on advertising. So 0.2% of their budget is spent, of their revenue goes to advertising. The menu does a lot of the heavy lifting for them. It drives repeat visits, brand recall, and word of mouth. And not to mention, this is not practical. It's not streamlined, but it's wildly effective because it's true to the brand, and it's something that's worth talking about. So when you think about the world we live in, where everybody is optimizing for efficiency, sometimes the most strategic move is to go maximalist and do it intentionally. Just again, defining what is that type of talk trigger that's going to evoke the type of word of mouth conversation with your customers that they're going to want to share with other people. My third element of the delusion in brand when it comes to B2B marketing is compromise. Compromise kills creativity. And something that I want to kind of illustrate here, I'm sure all of us at some point have either owned or we still own a Swiss Army knife. It's packed with tools. It's got scissors, a corkscrew, a fish scaler, magnifying glass. But let's be honest, why do most of us use, why do we typically use this? We just need one or two of the tools. And metaphorically speaking, this is exactly how I think a lot of brands solve creative problems. They keep adding, whether it's more features, more tone, more visuals, more personality, more fluff, hoping that it adds up into something meaningful. But when you try to be everything, you end up kind of diluting your value and becoming nothing. It's really about this creative tension, a contradiction that is not really being resolved. And that's where a systematic process that I've used over my career has helped me tremendously. It's called trees, and we'll talk about this in the next slide. But I want you to know that this is not typical for brand strategy. In fact, I've never heard a brand strategist talk about the trees principles, because engineers developed it. It was actually developed by a Russian engineer about 100 years ago, where they looked at over 200,000 patents and distilled those patents into 40 principles to solve a variety of problems. I've actually used this for brand building, and it's been incredibly helpful in creating sort of unexpected outcomes in my creative process. So let's talk about TREES, which stands for the theory of inventive problem solving. TREES fundamentally helps you solve contradictions without diluting ideas. So when you think about a contradiction, we want to sell to enterprise, but the majority of our customers are SMB. We want to be perceived as being very empathetic to our customers, but all of our support centers are offshore. Any of those contradictions can be solved with this framework of thinking. And there's 4 aspects to TREES. First is defining the ideal final result. So what does that basically mean? It's your North Star. It's the perfect version of the outcome, even if it's unrealistic. Again, in branding, this could be our product feels premium and exclusive without needing a high-touch sales process. So it basically, the ideal final result forces you to define success without compromise. And that's where it opens up space for creative thinking and invention. The second is the contradiction. And this is really the heart of where most creative tension lies. We want to be bold, but we can't scare off risk-averse buyers. So most companies, again, resolve this by watering everything down. And TREES helps us resolve it without losing either side of it. The third is resources. Most of us chase new tools or ideas, but oftentimes the answer is right in front of us. So a resource could be an underutilized channel, a customer behavior, or even an internal language or ritual that we develop. We kind of go back to Chewy. Chewy didn't invent empathy. They saw it as the white space where they could really shine. And lastly, it's patterns of evolution. So we don't evolve randomly. We evolve through a series of patterns. And what I've done most of my career is I've actually looked outside of my own industry to find new ways of thinking and creative answers. So think, how did direct-to-consumer brands evolve from just doing static ads to behind-the-scenes founder videos? Or how SaaS has moved from feature selling to usage-based onboarding flows. These patterns help us reveal what can be next. And most of us, when we brainstorm, we go as hard as we can until we hit this wall. So this is really a map to help us break through that wall systematically. And like I mentioned, there's 40 principles as part of TREES. You don't have to know them all. You don't have to remember them. But these are not buzzwords. They're engineering principles, and you can steal them. You could absolutely use these to help problem solve whatever it is that you're trying to get a better solution or idea out of. So it's really endless when you map any type of problem to one or two or three of these principles. So let's kind of go through a contradiction, and something probably a lot of us, especially in B2B SaaS, have experienced before. We want our brand to feel bold and edgy, but we work with risk-averse customers. So what do most brands do in this contradiction? They try to incorporate a lot more fun illustrations. They try to change their voice and tone to sound a little bit more quirky, or they just use all sorts of buzzwords to sound more edgy. None of that is actually meaningful. And again, if you go through the customer journey and actually experience the buying process with those businesses, you'll find that that brand does not express itself that way when you're actually interacting with the people and the products. So let's apply some of these trees principles to trying to solve this contradiction. Principle number 17, it's the transition to a new dimension. So an example of this could be, if you have a bold voice and you want to express it with your brand, but you're not doing it on your website, you're not doing it in your email comms, take it to new channels. Take it somewhere where you're currently not spending a lot of time. So this could be live events where you're giving thought-provoking talks. Maybe this is an opportunity when you do PR and interviews with journalists. Say something that other people are not saying in your space. Or if you are utilizing social and you have a team that's active on social, that's a great platform to kind of share your strategic point of view. But again, you don't want to dilute the reality. These are two contradictions that can live together at the same time. You can have a safe product for risk-averse customers while still being bold. The second principle here would be extraction, another one of the trees frameworks. So what about removing what creates perceived risk? Offer a no questions asked refund or opt-out plan. Let customers test new features in beta mode before you actually push them live. Make edgy feel safe. The third principle you could leverage is intermediary. So this is maybe where you use reputable third parties, whether it's consultants, analysts, customer advisory board members, industry influencers, to share hot takes that align with your brand promise. And then another principle is inversion. Let customers share their feedback on your roadmap or new features. Offer customers a monthly Ask Me Anything with your leadership team. These are still ways to be a bit more edgy while still ensuring that your risk-averse buyers don't feel alienated. And a brand that I think does this exceptionally well is Basecamp. Basecamp is notorious for saying no to things and doing and operating in a very different model than pretty much any other B2B SaaS company I can think of. So what are the type of trees principles that they've applied? Extraction. They've stripped away what most software brands tend to add. Feature bloat, pricing tiers, pushing tons of upgrades. This is something that they've decided they're going to opt out from. They're going to say no to that. Inversion, which we talked about in the previous slide, is another principle that Basecamp applies. Instead of chasing what competitors do, they actually publicly reject it. They don't believe in back-to-back meetings. They believe in deep work. Even the way they operate internally aligns with this brand value of theirs, of saying no and focusing more on less. Another dimension is a principle that they've applied. So their voice actually extends beyond their product into books and essays and podcasts. This point of view that they share enters into new dimensions like a publishing brand would. And then self-service, another one of the trees principles they've adopted. So they design for simplicity and self-sufficiency. They don't do long sales calls. They don't do any high-touch onboarding. They trust their customer, and that becomes part of their brand trust as well. So Basecamp's power isn't in what they add, it's in what they refuse to do. Their brand is built through intentional constraints. And that's really the classic trees framework applied. So when we summarize all of this, right, we talked about where people think about brand wrong. where brand gets diluted and why creativity gets stuck, and how brands don't map to the true customer experience. Here's a quick summary on that. Instead of designing for attention, design for memory. Break patterns. Do something that your competitors are not doing, and start small as you experiment how you're going to actually do that. Turn your operations into brand behaviors, the rituals that customers can expect from you, and creates a talk trigger that they're going to want to share to other people that they know. And solve contradictions with creativity, not compromise. Apply the trees framework to unlock moments your competitors would never consider. And if you follow these three things, it's going to unlock a lot of great conversation amongst your team. I think these would be really good frameworks to apply to a strategy meeting. But I think it's also going to challenge you, as it's challenged me, to realize how limited our thinking can really be when we're trying to solve for problems. It's so easy to copy. But again, if we follow the rules, we'll stay invisible. There are some cheats where we know how to tap into status and affiliation to help people feel something that they otherwise wouldn't expect to feel from our brand. And then lastly, we have to surprise and delight, zigging where others zag. And we do those things over time. We build a brand that is actually foundational to the experience we want to share with our customers. It's not just the hype. It's not just the messaging. So hopefully that was helpful. I know we covered a lot here. Happy to answer any questions right now.
Perfect. Thank you ever so much, Andrei. Super interesting session. And thank you so much for going through and giving so many examples as well for everyone to take away with. And we have got one question in the comments at the moment, but if anyone else has got any, please feel free to pop those in there, because we'll be making sure we're getting through all of the different questions today. But I'm really interested to kind of understand a little bit more in terms of talk triggers and that strategic, repeatable behavior. In terms of convincing leadership to invest in something like that, how do you go about that? And what does that look like with either talk triggers or trees as well?
Yeah, so I think talk triggers is something that leadership might have an opinion on, at least in my experience, but start small. One behavior, one segment, one experiment. You don't really need huge budget to do this. You need buy-in just to try something small, test it, and then measure the organic reactions. So again, likes, mentions, social shares, even anything that might come up in CSAT or NPS. Once they see what happens when behavior drives brand, they can't really unsee it. I promise you, when Cheesecake Factory launched their menu in 1978, that was ridiculous. There were no attribution tools. There were no very scientific processes that they knew this is working or not. They just trusted their instincts. They walked into their restaurants. They observed how their customers were interacting with the menu. So be incredibly curious and observational when you experiment with a talk trigger, and see literally what kind of a reaction is this evoking from a customer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Brilliant. And Amber's asked the question here, just building on that in terms of budget examples. So can you give a budget example for a test that you've run? And are you able to conduct this with minimal costs, well outside of personal time?
Yeah, I'll give you an example. So when I worked at a company called Dosh, which ended up getting acquired by Cardlytics, it was a fintech company. It was a consumer cashback app. Really a marketplace where on one side consumers downloaded the app, they attached their debit cards, and anytime they swiped their card at a point of sale, they would get instant cash back credited to them. I was responsible for the B2B side of the business, really dealing with the brands and merchants in our marketplace. And a talk trigger test that I ran was, we had about 500 partners that we had more than 500 partners, but I wanted to start with 500 partners of ours, merchants and brands, to really kind of create a special brand moment where we could get referrals to other merchants. What I did was I actually went to the bank and I asked to get $2 bills, literal $2 bills. I took those $2 bills, I put them on various envelopes with a handwritten note, and I talked about the surprise and delight of getting cash unexpected. And the reason I chose a $2 bill was because, well, $1, everybody has it. It's really cheap. It doesn't really mean anything. $10, that would probably blow the budget. Like $10 times 500 customers, that's a lot of money. Typically, when most people get $2 bills, because they're so rare, they save them. They keep them in their wallet. You typically get a $2 bill from like your grandma, and you keep it as sort of like a keepsake kind of item. It's something that's treasured and coveted. So when I got the $2 bills, it was about evoking that type of emotional experience that would then end up sort of being something that they would save in their wallets. And anytime they pull it out, they could talk about us. It was a point of reference, a moment of recall of associating Dosh, the brand, to that $2 bill. And so my budget for it was like literally $1,000 plus mailing. It wasn't super expensive, and it generated a ton of word of mouth. It even got the CMO of McDonald's to pick up the phone and call our CEO and ask, who did this? This is brilliant. Why? No one's ever sent me a $2 bill before. It became a talk trigger for our brand.
Brilliant. That's such a lovely example. And we've got another question coming through here. Bear with me 1 second. Do you see this question here, Andrei?
I do. I'm trying to understand it. I believe in
yeah, me too.
A lot of getting before selling, particularly if the field is rather than you for customers and other players. Tapping into existing communities is a powerful way to do so. Do you have any example on how you went about something? I'm not sure I'm 100% clear on what the ask is, but I'm wondering if like the question is around like, are there communities you can tap into?
Yeah, I guess so.
To source inspiration, maybe?
Not sure. We can always get back to that one. Yeah, well, Alex, could you just put in the comments the different?
Well, the answer is absolutely yes. You can do that, and I mentioned that even in the presentation, that like you kind of have to look outside of your industry to understand what's working and what people are responding to, and then use the trees framework to be like, well, if I bring that into my own industry, now I'm set up with a contradiction, because we don't do that. We sell software, we're digital only, we don't have physical brick and mortar stores, so we can't create that type of experience. Wrong. Yeah. You can follow the trees framework and start creating new ideas around those principles, around how you can evoke meaningful sensory experiences that feel physical, but they're actually deployed virtually. I'll give you an example of that, actually. When I was running our customer advisory board for 3 years, one of the things that we noticed was, gosh, those meetings just became so boring. They're just every quarter it's a rehash. We're, product roadmap, feedback for us, what can we do better? And it was very one directional, meaning like we had our customers basically just tell us what we wanted to hear. I wanted to do something with the customer advisory board that actually showed our gratitude and appreciation for our customers in a really unusual way. So, we had a very fun, playful brand with a lot of personality. And I wanted to tap into sort of like this childlike happiness for our CAB members. We had 25 members at the time. So we developed our own flavor of ice cream, and we sent it to each of our customers on the day of the CAB meeting. And we wanted them to enjoy a branded ice cream while, having this 45-minute long meeting with our executive team. It became a talk trigger. It became something that people remembered. I don't know of anybody, they were saying, that would send me ice cream, before a meeting. And again, it's finding those small moments of surprise and delight. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. And those are the things that people typically remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you advise in that scenario? Say that you do have a brand that's not necessarily bold, full of personality, or even has those kind of polarizing views to offer. What would you say is the best advice there in terms of implementing a talk trigger and inspiring those moments? I guess if you can't quite fully lean into making an ice cream or having a bit more fun with your tone of voice or being more playful per se.
Yeah. Well, like some of the things that we talked about, in that example, literally the tension between being safe and being edgy.
Yeah.
It's one way of doing it is take the edginess to another dimension that your brand is currently not really occupying. So if your website, your white papers, your social channels are sort of diluted with boring legacy B2B vibes, but you're trying to push your brand to actually be more provocative and edgy, take that edgy to a different realm. Take it to Reddit, take it to the media. Host some live dinner events where you're able to actually say the things that you really want to say, the provocative hot takes. You don't have to put that on your homepage. You could take it somewhere else. And over time, if it resonates and people actually start associating, those types of activities to your brand to be more edgy, you'll then feel more confident in then going back to some of your core assets and trying to infuse that edgy personality into it. But first take it to another realm before you invest a lot of time and resources in changing everything that you've already built in terms of your brand system and identity.
Okay, perfect. And say you are implementing those changes and say your team is also growing as well. How do you keep that consistent? Because I can imagine it might be a bit surprising if someone from the brand just rocks up and starts giving a really kind of creative presentation or something that's really pushing it. So yeah, how do you recommend kind of keeping that consistency? And also, again, if the brand is growing, how do we keep control of that?
Yeah. A lot of my area of focus has actually been in post sales. Like as a brand marketer, I've spent a crazy amount of time obsessing over, what our customers' lived experiences are. So typically when we're implementing a talk trigger post sales, it's actually like the CS organization that has to stand behind it and implement it. And if they see that it's working and they believe that it's adding value to the customers, it becomes a real ritual for the business. It becomes an operational function. So as an example, if during onboarding, every new customer during onboarding, if you have a talk trigger that's effective, that's going to be instituted as part of the operational process of getting up and running with your SaaS tool. So it has to be codified like a ritual. And it's something that's just part of the process, just like there's so many other things that are part of our rituals. QBRs are part of our rituals. Renewal contracts being sent are part of our rituals. Talk triggers can also be part of our rituals.
Okay, perfect. And I know you spoke a little bit about this in your presentation as well, but how do you know if a talk trigger is working? Obviously, you want people to kind of share those moments. We've had other speakers come on and talk about how you want people to share, but you don't want to prompt them to share these moments. So how do you know if it's working, and how can you report that back to the team as well?
Yeah, so sharing is obviously the best way to kind of track it, and there's other things you could do too. So you could send out surveys to the segment of customers where you tested something, and you could get their feedback. You could do focus groups with your customers and collect that feedback. And especially once you start noticing that they're bringing it up unprompted, that's typically when you know, okay, this new ritual that we've deployed is actually like sticking with our customers because they're proactively sharing it with us. Like we didn't ask what our customer advisory board members thought about the ice cream. They told us, right? So things like that, you just know, right? You just know. If you keep hearing it repeatedly, you just know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing we hear all the time in our research is, I just know it's working because it feels like it's heading in the right direction. It's like basing it on intuition, great. But then there's always going to be people in the team going, where are the numbers? What's this look like? But no, it's good to hear that again. And I'm just curious as well in terms of like organizational size. Does all of this work for small startups, or is this only suited to kind of bigger orgs? How do you feel about in terms of size and company?
I've worked in both, and I've done it in both. I will say that if you are a smaller company, it's a lot easier. You just have a lot more room for experimentation. Bigger companies naturally operate more bureaucratically, more risky. That doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just has to go through more of an internal buy-in process to actually implement it. But I think if you're like in an organization that is 1,500 people or smaller, it's fairly simple to do this. Again, just align with your functional leader, and maybe the functional leader, if you plan to experiment, for example, on something that's like pre-sales, then align with the sales leader or the marketing leader. If it's post-sales, that's where you can get into customer success managers or support teams. Either way, it's not as hard. You just need those stakeholders to be aware and just define it properly. Tell them exactly what your goal is, who you're going to target, how long it's going to run, and what you're looking to measure. It shouldn't be a point of friction, right? We're not trying to add stress to our customers. We're trying to add delight to our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, perfect. And one thing I really wanted to touch on as well, I know right at the beginning of your presentation, you spoke about Southwest and creating those unforgettable moments. I'm really curious to hear your advice on this. If something goes not to plan, say you go viral for the wrong reasons, or something sticks where you didn't think it was going to stick, how do you go about that? What do you do when it goes slightly wrong? And how do you embrace those moments and switch those around to become positive talk triggers?
That's a great question. Again, it's sort of, you have to go back and define what is the surprise and delight I'm trying to create. If you write that down and it's something that you realize like most people will either not understand or potentially be offended by, obviously just don't do it in the first place. But if it's something that you believe in earnest can actually add a really positive moment and experience for your customers, then what you can do is, and especially if it starts working, you see it's working, is it's something that's actually codified and representative of your brand. Like, if your brand is about safety and trust, then don't dilute your brand by trying to implement a talk trigger that is going to be provocative or alienating to what your brand stands for. Like, always try to align it with what is like the core belief of the brand identity. Are you there to serve? Are you there to protect? Are you there to challenge? Are you there to inspire? And then start drawing lines with ideas from those words around what's an act of surprise and delight that can inspire? What's an act of surprise and delight that can challenge, right? So just have some safeguards and common sense up front, before you deploy something. Because again, like, there's a difference between a talk trigger and a gimmick. A gimmick is a stunt. It's just meant to get attention, but it's not actually tied to the brand itself. A talk trigger is an operational moment. It's something every customer will experience. So it's just different lenses of thinking through it, but it has to still be relevant to your brand. So again, it's like something that can be repeatable, something that is relevant, something that's also reasonable, right? It can't be so outrageous that it doesn't even make any sense.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Absolutely. So I think that's everything in terms of questions today. So I think we're going to wrap up just here. But thank you ever so much, everyone, for joining. It's been a really lovely session and great to hear from you as well, Andrei. So thank you ever so much for joining. Now, if anyone has any other questions, feel free to reach out to Andrei via LinkedIn. You can see his URL is just on the screen just there. And tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. CT, you'll receive a newsletter from me, which will excuse me, I'm losing my voice today. It will include all of the slides, all of the information, and the key tactics and takeaways that you can go ahead and implement today. So thank you ever so much, Andrei. And you'll all be hearing from me tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. CT. But thank you ever so much for joining, and we'll see you again next week.
Thank you so much, everyone.